right? And his definition for government as well. So it is something like, government of the people, by the people, and for the people. In the same way, open source is really very, very similar to that of Abraham Lincoln's definition for government. So I can define open source something like, open source project is a project of the developers, by the developers, and for the developers, right? So there are many definitions on the web if you go for, but this is the most basic form of definition which we can use for open source projects. All right. So next, moving on to the next question, that is, what is software documentation, right? So, and why the hell do we need that? My dear friends, software documentation is one of the most important part of development life cycle. Reliable documentation for your application is must. And actually, if there is no documentation, we consider the software is incomplete. So, what is software documentation? It is nothing but documenting all the aspects of your application. Like. It could be of product documentation or code documentation. Product documentation would be more like, how to use that particular product. And at the same time, code documentation will be about the code base, right? So why do we need that? So imagine a situation, my dear friends, where you're working in a company and senior most developer of your company suddenly decides to stop working for you. So just imagine how difficult it would be for new developers to get onto the core, right? So this itself explains or states how vital, how important software documentation is, right? So with that said, let's get started for the tools that have made React documentation a piece of cake. So the first tool we will be working on is Dev.to. So let me share my screen. Just a second. So yeah, now we will go to Dev.site. So before starting what Doxy is, I want you guys to start installing the required dependencies for working practically on Doxy. So if you're using yarn, go with this command, and if you're using npm, you can go with this command. So it's pretty much simple. Just open your terminal, Control Alt press T, and just create a directory wherever you want, and just paste this command, because it will take bit time. And in the meantime, I will take an overview of what Doxy is and what kind of problem it is trying to solve here. All right. So please start downloading or installing your npm dependencies. Right. So what is Doxy? So it's an tool for, of course, it's a tool for documenting your React components. So actually, Docs is built with Gatsby.js. All right. So it makes it really huge, really rich with the plugins because of the huge community ecosystem of Gatsby.js, right? And it comes with zero configuration. So what does that mean? So we do not need to configure any additional files for adding Doxytor file. We can just add Doxytor code base, and we can, the documentation is ready. We will work practically in just couple of seconds, right? So it is easy to customize. Of course, it is easy to customize, and then one of the most core feature of Doxy, it is based on MDX. So what the heck this MDX is now? MDX is nothing but where you can write JSX in your Markdown file. Now, how beautiful that feature is, right? Writing JSX in your Markdown file, and it is also having TypeScript support. So with that said, I think now you have downloaded or installed your Doxy dependencies on your code. So let's start working practically on our Doxy, right? So I'll just open your any of your code editor. You will have when once you install, you will have these many files. One is Doxy, of course, and other is Node modules, because you have installed React and React DOM. I want you guys to create two new files. That is, one is button.js and one is index.mdx. I have installed it already, so I have created these files previously. And next, what we'll be doing is we'll go to documentation side of Doxy, right? So you know what is the best tutorial for that particular skill? It's documentation, of course, because no one can nowhere else you can get the information about that particular tech stack other than documentation, right? So once you're in documentation, you will get to see the package.json file, where I want you guys to paste this lines in your package.json file. It's actually, sorry, not this one. Oops, the scripts file. All right. So copy the script and go to your code editor, and in package.json file, please paste it. I have already pasted it, as you can see over here, because I have installed it previously, right? So now let's get started. So first of all, we'll go to index.mdx file, and we'll write our first mdx lines over here to start with documenting our React components with doc.c. Right? So we'll just start with YAML files. Please follow me. I will explain everything once we complete this file, right? So first name, and then we add name for the documentation. That is, let's start with hello world, and then we'll add root. We'll keep it simple, and we'll complete the YAML file. So it is YAML syntax, all right? It's a YAML syntax, and then we can start writing our markdown syntax using hashtag hello world, and let's save it. Once you save that, we open a terminal, and just you're supposed to just type the command npm run doc.z colon dev. All right. Once you hit this command, it will build the component, and our documentation site will go live. All right. So once it's live, we will go to localhost and just refresh the page. As you can see, hello world has printed over here, right? So let's play around with this. We'll add few more lines in our index.mdx file. For example, let's add hashtag is nothing but h1 tag, right? H1 header kind of tag. So if we take two hashtags, then it's h2. So let's write something like this documentation is generated by doxing. Let's save it and recheck on our browser and refresh the page. And it's taking a bit time. As you can see, this is documentation generated by doxing, right? So this is how cool it is. So let's start by writing some component in button.js file. So we will add a button component to our project directory. So let's start by adding it. We'll start with importing React, of course. Import React from React, and then we'll add our button component using const, and then button is equal to, we'll add to the props for the component, that will be children, and we'll add kind actually, and yeah. So let's return something from this component, and we'll return actually button tag. So button tag with kind of kind prop, and content will be children. All right. So let's export it so that we can use this in our markdown file. Right. So now we are actually working on using JSX in our markdown file, and for that reason we are creating our button component. Right. So let's export our button component so that we can use it in our markdown file. Right. So export button. So that's it. Just a second. All right. We will use something else. And yeah, we have exported our button. So let's import it in our markdown file using import, curly braces button, and from button. Right. So now we will add JSX in our Markdown file. So how do we do that? Let's see. Just go to the last of the line and start writing, start adding a JSX directly into a Markdown file. That simple it is, right? So starting with button, using on click, and we'll add some sort of, alert over here. All right. So we'll add alert and just click me in that alert. So yeah, that's it. And we end this alert actually, right? So click me button again. So let's check what it will display on our documentation side. Refresh this page, and as you can see, we have successfully, a rendered button on our documentation workspace or documentation site. Click me button, as we have written here the click me button. So now we will be focusing on the special built-in components that Doxy has. So there are two kinds of special components in Doxy. One is playground component and the other is props component. So first we'll be working on playground component. So what is playground components? It is a special built-in component by Doxy where actually it renders the component, and it comes with a live editable playground under the rendered component where you can edit the code and test its efficiency live. All right, so let's start working on playground component. Right, for that, we need to import playground component from Doxy. How do we do that? Using import and playground from Doxy. That's it. And we will use it at the end of the line, just to create another subheading using playground component, name it playground component. And syntax for playground component is damn simple. Just follow me. Playground, and let's add button to this component. The button is actually which we are importing it from the button.js file. All right. So button, and we'll add click me over here, and sorry, and let's add another button component over here, and here we'll add time to it, which we added in button.js component file, right? So we'll keep it secondary, and let's add click me again over here, click me and button again, and let's complete the playground tag component. Sorry. So save the file, and let's refresh the browser and check if we are having any playground component in our documentation site or not. And as you can see, we're having a playground component over here. And let me show you the beauty of this component, right? So it comes with live editable code just below the rendered component. So this is the rendered component which we are seeing, and this is live editable code, the same code which we have which we wrote in the index.mdx file, right? So let's edit it to check the live editable feature of this, right? So I have removed the click me, and you can see the click me has disappeared from the rendered component, right? We'll add something like submit now, and as you can see, here is the submit. So this is the beauty of this Doxy, which makes different from the other tools. It comes with a playground component where we can edit our rendered component live and test its efficiency. Right. So moving on to the next special feature for Doxy, that is props component. So what is props component? Of course, it is a special built-in component, but what does that do? So props component is a component which takes another React component and generates a neat formatted table of it describing showcasing the contents or the characteristics of that particular React component, right? So let's work on it. For that, we'll add few properties to our button component, right? So let's add few properties to button component. We add button dot, first we need to import key from React. So let's import it first. Import key from prop types. Yeah, and let's add few properties to our button component, right? So button dot prop types. So it is nothing but characteristics, no, sorry, properties for our button component, right? So yeah, sorry. And in this we'll add kind to the properties. So kind is p dot of with few properties with square brackets, and let's add few properties for the button prototypes, right? So one is primary, secondary, and cancel. At the same time we'll even add dark. And yeah, so this is one property. Let's add another property, button, as more kind of default property. So button dot default props, and it will be like just one time, and that is primary. So this is a default property which are adding to our button component. Let's say both of this, and now we will import props component in our index.mdx file, that is our markdown file, right? So let's import props component, and that's it. Now we will create another section with heading of props component, and let's add props component over here using button component. Props of is equal to button. So what it does, it will take one component, that is button component, and it will check if button is having some sort of properties or not. And if it has, it will render and table for that particular button component. So let's save this file and check if it is rendering some sort of table or not. Let's refresh the documentation site and check if it works or not. And as you can see, we are having props component section over here, and with the table of neatly formatted properties of our button component. As you can see, primary, secondary, cancel, and dark. These are the kinds of properties we have for our button component, and primary is here specially at the side because we have made a default property over here. As you can see, just a second, like I'll show you, right? So default props we have added kind primary, so that's the reason why we're having this over here, right? So now the specialty of this is we can even add comments to the comments to our properties, and it will render, it will also render in our props rendered component. So let's check that. We'll add few lines of comments over here. All right. So we'll add something like this is neatly formatted component. Right. So that's it. Let's check if this is rendered in our prop component on our documentation site or not. Sorry. Refresh. Yeah, it's refreshing. Just a second. Actually, it has not. Let me check. Just a second. I don't know why it's having some issues. It's not showing. Maybe I'm doing it wrong. So this is everything about Doxy, what we have worked on. So we have worked on documenting our get component. Uh, we looked how to add JSX to our markdown file, and we also worked on playground component with its live editable code. Coding playground just under the rendered component, and we also worked on props component, which is rendering or generating a neat formatted table which constitutes the properties of your own React component, right? So this is everything. It's like a quick introduction about Doxy, right? So we have worked practically on it, and there. Let's take a small break, and of course there are a few more tools that we'll be taking an overview of after this short break. Thank you. Hello, Charu.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Was that good? Or
Yes, 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 very good.
So welcome back, guys, and let's start with the remaining portion of our session. So actually, I just sorted out that I made a small, syntax error for this prop component. So it is something like we should comment over here with this kind of syntax, right? So this, now I can add the comment over here, like this is an, or like we can add it like this is enough description for prop component. Save it, and now you check in our browser by refreshing it, and as you can see now we are having one ad over here. Oh, as you can see now we are having an ad over here, and if we click on it, the same, the same comment which we wrote just in the editor, right? Let's check it by changing it. Now we'll add something like Dogsy is rich with features like playground and props. Save it and refresh on your browser. And as you can see, Dogs is rich with features like playground and props has already displayed, right? So that's pretty much it about Doxy. And now we will, work, or I will take you guys through an overview of the few of remaining tools to document your React application, right? So yeah, so second number tool, open source tool, which for documenting your React application is Storybook. So what is Storybook? It's nothing but an tool used for user interface development, UI development. With Storybook, we can work on one component at a time and can develop the complete UI without any tech stack, right? So it makes the process of developing UI faster, and at the same time it increases stability of that component and reliability of the component by isolating them, and at the same time it's also skills then, right? So in Storybook there is a story, right? So how do we add documentation in Storybook? There are stories for each and every single component. So in this case now we previously worked on button component, right? So if you want to document our same code with Storybook, we need to create another file with name of button.stories.js. If you are having button component, we need to have story with name button.stories.js. If you are having form component, so we will have a story for form component like form.component dot form.story.js, right? Not component, sorry, it is form.stories.js, right? So stories is having a special feature known as arcs, which is used for live editing of an arguments. As the same we had props in our doc. And next tool for documenting our React application is React Style Digest. It is an isolated React component development environment. This tool is of course used for React components, documenting your React components, and has various variations and states of components for testing those components, right? So it generates documentation for React components from our README files. Alright, it generates automatically from our README files, from our source code, and from our prop type declarations, right? So it is a great tool for using. It even displays JS docs comment blocks from the components as documentation. And next is bit.dev. Bit.dev is a way ahead tool, and it's not just about documenting, it's not just about documentation of your React application. It is a component-based user interface development. It is a platform for sharing and collaborating not just React components, but also Vue and Angular components, CSS sheets, and at the same time middlewares and modules too. We can bind all the files and dependencies of a component using Bit and can run them on any application. It also sounds like a Docker if you're working in, right? So in the same way, a component is using bit and can run them on any application you want. How it does that? It binds all the modules, middlewares, files in a package, and we can use it on any application we want. So we can integrate bit with our components by tracking our files by bit add command. This will add all of our files to special repository which is understood by Git. We can tag our components in bit, which makes our components ready for reusable across all the platforms. It contains, it generates documentation. If you have any kind of GS docs or Markdown file in your project, Bit will generate docs from those files automatically, right? And Bit parses comments from components and renders them as components documentation. All we need to do is write those comments in Markdown. That's it. If your project has any kind of test, testers will run those tests and build components in isolations and help us to get better stability, reliability of our components. So BitDev is a very advanced tool, which we can't discuss everything about in this short session. We can take another session for bit.dev, specifically. So that's it. These are the tools that we have discussed today. One was Doxy. It is rich with features like playground component and props component that is built-in components from Doxy. We took an overview of some of the other tools for documenting a React application that consists of Storybook, React style guides, and bit.dev. So that's it for you guys today. See you in the next session. Thank you.